Hey, high school literacy leaders, welcome back to Curriculum Chats. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and in this video, I'll be discussing lessons 6 and 7 in the second section of the In the Time of the Butterflies unit. And we'll get started with lesson 6. In this lesson, students will analyze how characters' behaviors and underlying motivations contribute to moral dilemmas that influence the plot and theme in Chapter 6. They will evaluate Alvarez's purpose, audience, and message within Chapter 6, and critique and evaluate how Alvarez's use of language in Chapter 6 informs and shapes the perception of readers. The text for this lesson is In the Time of the Butterflies. The materials are the Biographical Lens Note-Taking Tool, Vocabulary Journal, Style Reference Guide, and Section 2 Question Set. For the lesson overview, we will closely read and analyze a section of Chapter 6, Minerva, 1949, through the biographical lens. And there are 5 activities in this lesson. All are core. So lesson 6 begins with students reviewing what they know about the biographical lens from the previous lesson and how the lens relates to the text by reviewing their biographical lens note-taking tools and discussing the questions on the screen as a class. So what have you learned about the biographical lens thus far, and how does reading the text through the biographical lens shape how you think about the text? Next, students reread and analyze an excerpt of Chapter 6. As they read, they are also annotating the text, focusing on the biographical lens and information that could connect to or be informed by Alvarez's personal history. The questions on the screen from the Section 2 question set are used to guide their annotations. They should cite evidence from the text to support their answers. This activity concludes with students discussing their annotations or the questions with a partner. Next, students reread the same excerpt from Chapter 6 and annotate for rhetorical, syntactical, and literary devices. These devices include diction, characterization, metaphors, similes, allusions, and connotations. Once they have marked these devices, students consider how they connect to their knowledge of Julia Alvarez. For example, what is implied about Trujillo's character in the sentence, "He grinned a naughty grin"? How is Alvarez's personal background connected to the devices they've selected? Finally, they discuss their annotations and ideas with a partner or in a small group. For this activity, it is important for students to bring their past work with literary devices into this text and begin reading and annotating on their own through the biographical lens. They should be able to properly identify several literary devices in this section and use their knowledge of Julia Alvarez to examine the impact of the devices on the text. If students need a refresher on literary devices, the teacher might direct them to the Style Reference Guide. Alternately, they might provide students with pre-selected devices in order to focus their analysis on applying the biographical lens. If students are struggling to identify devices, there is a list in the teaching notes to provide extra support. Students could also complete these annotations in pairs or small groups. If students continue to struggle with the application of literary criticism lenses, the teacher might consider completing these annotations in a whole group setting. Next, students use their annotations to complete an entry in the biographical lens note-taking tool that analyzes Julia Alvarez's diction and the characterization of Trujillo in the line, "He grins a naughty grin," before sharing responses with the class. This lesson concludes with students finishing Chapter 6, thinking about the question on the screen as they read. What seem to be Alvarez's major concerns in this chapter? Do they reflect any of her personal choices? And adding new or interesting words they encounter in their vocabulary journal. There is a summary of the chapter in the teaching notes, as well as an explanation that the chapter's events reveal how the Mirabels come to know Trujillo more personally and how the sisters got on the regime's bad side. This is also a big turning point, and Minerva articulates a sense of having started something that sisters cannot stop. If the teacher chooses not to assign this reading for homework, they might continue to read out loud as a whole group or in small groups. If students are reading independently, check for understanding frequently. Questions to check for basic comprehension can be found in the teaching notes. Our cub for this lesson, I think that number is wrong. Students will know definitions of diction and characterization, understand how Alvarez's use of language informs and shapes the perception of readers, and be able to analyze Julia Alvarez's diction and the characterization of Trujillo in the line, "He grins a naughty grin," using the biographical lens note taking tool. Yeah, that should be lesson 6 cup. Moving on to lesson 7. Students will synthesize information from Chapter 6 and outside sources to create new understanding, evaluate Alvarez's purpose, audience, and message within Chapter 6, and develop analytical responses into a focused, structured, and coherent paragraph by developing an engaging idea reflecting depth of thought with effective use of details, examples, and commentary. Same text. A couple of materials forming evidence-based claims tool and the section 2 question set. For the lesson overview, we will form evidence-based claims and write an analytical paragraph about Chapter 6, Minerva, 1949, and there are 3 core activities in this lesson. Lesson 7 begins with students working either individually or with a partner to complete the forming evidence-based claims tool and answer the question on the screen. What did Julia Alvarez experience that could have influenced her decision to include information about Minerva's desire to go to law school in the novel? Students use what they have read to find key details in Chapter 6, a postscript, Still the Time for the Butterflies, a note from the author, and the reading and discussion guide that present Alvarez's experiences that influence the content of the novel. This activity challenges students' abilities to view literary text through a specific lens or viewpoint. This is an important process for students to master because it allows them to examine text through viewpoints other than their own. During this activity, they will collect a set of 4 details and then examine how these details display the impact of the author's knowledge and experience on the writing of the novel. Based on their knowledge of students, the teacher might consider modeling this process by adding the first 2 details to the tool before having students add the other 2 independently. Students could also be allowed to complete this activity in pairs or small groups. If some students are struggling with making connections across texts, the teacher might have them work with the Extending Understanding tool as a scaffolded support prior to completing a forming evidence-based claims tool. Next, students use their forming evidence-based claims tool to draft a paragraph that answers the question on the screen. How are Julia Alvarez's personal experiences reflected in the Time of the Butterflies? Their paragraph should have a clear introduction or topic sentence that includes their claim, the author's name, and the title of the text, an explanation of their position with relevant details, and an analysis of those details, textual evidence to support their claim, a conclusion that clearly states why the reader should care, the so what, or that synthesizes their points by pulling their information together in a succinct way. The teacher might support students by co-constructing a model paragraph with students or sharing a model paragraph the teacher created. If students need additional support, the teacher might consider using an organizing frame like a rhetorical précis. To conclude this lesson, students exchange paragraphs with a partner, read their partner's paragraph, analyze how well their partner analyzed the text through the biographical lens, and respond to the questions on the screen. To what extent does your partner's paragraph have a clear and arguable claim? To what extent does your partner's paragraph develop the claim with relevant details from the text? And to what extent is your partner's paragraph organized in a way that makes sense to you? Then they discuss their feedback with their partner before individually responding to the question, what do I need to do to write a clear, cohesive, and strong literary analysis paragraph in the margin of their paragraph? During the section diagnostic, they will write an analytical response using either the historical or biographical lens. Which brings us to our cub for lesson 7. Shouldn't be 5, 7. Lesson 7 cub. Students will know what Julia Alvarez experienced that could have influenced her decision to include information about Minerva's desire to go to law school. They'll understand how Julia Alvarez's personal experiences are reflected in the novel and be able to draft a paragraph that answers the question, how are Julia Alvarez's personal experiences reflected in the Time of the Butterflies, using the forming evidence-based claims tool? So that's a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.